Hello folks, this is Bob Dodrill, Application Engineer with Hilco Incorporated. Today I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about starting a project with Codesys 3.5.12.10, which is the latest software that Turk is using for our hardware. It is the latest firmware that Turk now is using is the Service Pack 12. So again, Codesys 3.5 Service Pack 12. And if you watched my previous video, you saw how to get the software, how to download and install. So for this meeting, we will start with a new project. So right here under Basic Operations, I'm going to click New Project. When that comes up, I want to pick what kind of device that I'm going to use. Now, I'm going to pick the HMI device because I want to start with a TX500. I want to name this. So under my name, I'm just going to call this, let's call it webinar, if I could spell, test. And I can say, okay. Now I get to choose the type of TX device that I want to use to program. And I'll do a TX700, 7-inch TX700. So that'll be the one that I pick. I like to use ladder logic. So I'm an older guy. I learned how to use ladder logic. That's what I use. But you do have the option of any of the programming languages that you choose. We can do structured text. We can do sequential function, continuous function chart. So again, or ladder or block diagram. Again, I like to use ladder logic. So I'm going to click OK. I'll let my project get started here, and it takes just a minute. We'll get it going just a few minutes. And please forgive my computer, folks. I have a lot of stuff going on right now. So I have my new project set up here, and I have my new screen set up. This is where I would do things. This is where I can find my PLC program, where I'm going to find my main ladder, my visualizations for my HMI screen. Now, in my case, I want to use Profinet because that's a language that, or a protocol that I like to use for programming. But I have to tell my TX device that I want it to be a system master. So I'm going to right click on device, and I'm going to add a device. In this case, I'm going to add a field bus. So the first thing that I want to add is an Ethernet adapter. So I'm going to put that in first, and I'm going to add the device. And then I'm going to close the screen. Now, under my Ethernet, again, I'm going to use Profinet because that is the network that I like. If you wanted Ethernet IP, you would simply add that as well. But I'm going to right click Ethernet, and again, I'm going to add a device, and I'm going to add my Profinet master. I'm going to add device, and I'm going to close this again. Now, the next step is I want to add, I've got my Profinet driver set up. I've got my controller. So I want to add some device. So again, I'm going to right click here. I'm going to add device again, and I'm going to go down my list, and I'm going to pick some network block that I wanted to use. In my case, let's use a TBN L4 8IO link, and I'm going to add that device. So that is basically how you would start to get your project going. Okay, so I have my Ethernet set up, I have my controller set up, and I have my brick set up. The next step would be to begin adding my IO link devices. So I want to go to my IO link port, and I'm going to pick the first port, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to plug a device. Now I have the option of some specific devices that are already loaded in the driver, and here's a few of them down through the list. or I can add a generic device. So if I added a generic device, I would pick from knowing my IO link device, I would know how big it was, how many words were in the process data. And in my case, I'm just going to pick an input 2-word and I'm going to plug that into my first port. And I'm going to close it. So now I've got this set up. I can go to my IO link port now and I can look at my parameterization for my IO link device. And all these are set the way that I want them. I've got my IO link without validation. Now I'm going to go to my mapping. And since I use the Profinet, it tells me right here, here's my input data words. And this is, so I know exactly where my words are going to come into my project. So here I'm going to add an alias. I'm going to develop a product or a project name, and I'll just call it IOL1. Real inventive, but again, I know now where my first word's going to come in. Now, one other thing, a few things that need to be set up by using our Profinet. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to open our device tab, and we're going to go to PLC settings. And we're going to change this. I want to always update my variables. I'm going to do enable to. So when this starts up, now all of my IO that I add will always run with the bus cycle. The next thing I want to do is I want to specify my bus cycle task, and I'm going to just make it the main task. Now everything's going to run with my main task. So the next thing I want to do to keep this going is I'm going to go to my Profinet IO task. I want to open this up, and I know that my controller can't do Profinet in 1 millisecond, so I'm going to make it 4 milliseconds, which is the fastest time that you can, or the slowest time, I should say, that you can add here is a 4 millisecond update. The next thing I'm going to do is go to my Ethernet controller. And I'm not connected, but this is where I would add my driver, a Profinet controller. This is where I put the IP addresses. And in the next session, I'm going to show you how you would set up your Profinet if you are connected. And again, I want to thank you for the time, and we'll continue with another session shortly. Thank you.